Unless you've actually trained, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to fully understand just how much of a skill gap there is between regular people and professional fighters. And when the skills, the power, and the overall athleticism of an MMA fighter are put to the test against your average, whether it's a playful situation or something more serious, the results are usually quite one-sided. This is UFC fighters versus regular people. Francis Ngannou. To kick things off, we have, well, there's no other way to put it. This is one of the stupidest things you'll ever likely to see. Francis Ngannou is one of the most powerful men to have ever laced up gloves and fought. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've seen more than enough evidence of what this guy is capable of. So when Danger Aaron of the hit show Jackass decided to willingly take a punch from the UFC heavyweight champion, right below the belt, you really had to feel for the guy. Protected only by a cup, Aaron agreed to a shot from the MMA's biggest hitter after being originally told that it would be a lightweight and not a heavyweight. Love it or hate it, that takes some real stones.
I never hit somebody in the nut. He took him back. He survived though.
Conor McGregor. Next up, we come to the sport's biggest star, a man who is known just as much for his victories inside the cage as he is for his antics outside of it. If you're a Conor McGregor fan, it can be pretty tough work to defend his actions, especially during that troubling period that followed his showdown with Floyd Mayweather. But for a lot of McGregor's biggest supporters, his infamous attack on a patron of a Dublin bar was the final straw. The story was simple. McGregor was out flaunting his infinite wealth in the local pub, and after deciding that everyone in the bar ought to try his proper 12 Irish whiskey, he bought a round for the entire room. The problem? One of the men drinking at the bar did not appreciate this general attitude and decided to refuse him. Conor then slapped the man in retaliation, which went down just as well with the general public as you might expect. A real low point for the Irishman, that's for sure. Ronda Rousey. Okay, we know the whole Ronda Rousey would beat Floyd Mayweather talk was way off, but in a straight-up MMA contest, this former UFC bantamweight champion would toy with the vast majority of people on this list. So when the comedian Tom Kelly decided to test his mettle against the Olympic judoka, it went just about as badly as you might expect. To say that Rowdy made mincemeat of him would be putting it lightly. Her years of MMA, judo, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu training allowed her to do pretty much whatever she wanted, and by the end of it, we're guessing Kelly was just as happy that it wasn't a real fight.
Yes, but then I think...
John Jones. John Jones could have definitely landed himself on this list for a variety of reasons, but we'll focus in on a more positive story just to mix things up. Picture the scene, you're a robber, and you just managed to find the perfect place to go to work. Kevin Holland. And perhaps the craziest of them all came when Holland, along with some others, stopped a man who had fired a gun in a Houston restaurant. Yeah, seriously, the UFC welterweight and friend were out innocently enjoying some sushi when they heard a loud bang. Before Holland knew it, he was wrestling the gunman to the ground, using his experience in the cage to eventually disarm him and bring the situation to a halt. It really does make you wonder just how badly things could have gone if there didn't happen to be a UFC superstar sitting nearby.
He's okay. Since we in H-Town, great words of Derek Lewis, he's okay.
Bas Rutten. You didn't think we'd forget to give Bas Rutten a mention, did you? As the owner of perhaps the greatest bar fight stories in all of mixed martial arts, Rutten is a man who will not take any form of unnecessary physical contact. And for this unlucky bunch of bouncers, crossing that line was a major mistake. As Bas tells it, a seemingly innocent situation was turned into total chaos when a group of bouncers working at a club in Sweden decided that they wanted nothing more than to pick a fight with Rutten. And to his credit, Bas did everything to defuse the situation. But once one of the bouncers poked him in the eyes, his line had been crossed. The former UFC heavyweight champ proceeded to beat up and knock out multiple bouncers in one fight, something KOing the same guy on more than one occasion, before eventually deciding to make a run for it.
So they didn't expect that. They thought I was going to do something, of course, so he pushes me. And I said, "Now, why would you push me?" I said, "I want to go. It's okay, you know, I don't want any trouble." And he started putting his finger on my chest, which is something I really can't stand, right? So I said, "Okay, don't touch me, because if you do that again, it's going to go wrong." And sure enough, they were looking for a fight, of course. He did it again, so I pushed him, and another guy behind him jumped over him, and he stabbed the finger in my eye. I said, "Guys, come on, let's stop this right now. I don't want to boop my other eye." And there I went, boom, and that guy went down. He went down like one punch. I've never seen anything. I heard him over the music. I heard that. Yeah, that was the wildest thing ever.
Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Chuck Liddell. Another UFC legend who has his fair share of legendary fight stories is the Iceman Chuck Liddell, a man who, during the peak of his fame, had to deal with unwanted challenges from any Tom, Dick, or Harry who thought they could bang with the UFC champion. But this story actually happened after UFC 38, when all hell broke loose, resulting in a brawl that mixed together some huge names and some relatively inexperienced bystanders. According to Liddell himself, he remembers knocking out at least 5 different people, but has been told by others that the number was closer to 7 or 8. In the end, Chuck avoided being arrested by quickly making a move on a girl who was standing nearby, walking away with her as the cops arrived.
I thought the number was around 5.
Wow.
I've told as high as 7 or 8, but I mean, I know how to fight in groups. I mean, big brawls. I grew up fighting a lot, and I know how to fight, and I hit hard. So, all I know is Tito was up and chasing it and trying to go after him when the cops showed up. When the cops showed up, it was all over. Everyone's safe. Now it's time for me to get out of here. I just put my arm around the first girl I saw. I said, "Hey, do you want to go get breakfast?" And just walked right by the cops. I was the only guy not detained by the cops. So.
Mike Perry. Mike Perry is a wild man. He's been a wild man since he first debuted in the UFC. And if anything, he's even more of a wild man today. But while we love him for his crazy interviews and even crazier battles inside the cage, there have been a few controversial moments that left many fans quite worried about his state of mind. One such moment came when a clearly intoxicated Perry was filmed acting quite confrontational at a restaurant with his partner. It was already a pretty ugly scene to begin with, but once an older man who was standing by tried to get involved, things took a turn for the disastrous. As Perry quickly knocked him out, just seconds into a brief scuffle, his time in the UFC didn't last for too long after this incident, and nowadays he is plying his trade under the bare knuckle FC banner. Dominic Cruz. This early clip of the UFC bantamweight legend Dominic Cruz shows just how competitive he was even before his best years in the sport. Cruz, if you don't know, really is game to fight anyone. Just ask Michael Bisping, who claims that the Dominator has tried to start fights with him in the past. But for this video, Cruz can be shown taking a challenge from a guy known only as Ninja. And after just a few seconds of watching, it becomes clear that these two are completely on different levels. Once Cruz gets his bearings, he begins to really tee off on his hopeless opponent, eventually giving him more than enough of a beating to force the stoppage. Cruz might not be known for his massive power, but there has always been a real fire inside this former 2-time bantamweight champion, Stephen Thompson. As nice as he is, step into the world of kickboxing with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at your own peril. While this next clip is certainly more of a playful spar than anything else, Wonderboy was a central part of a viral video that saw him take on a bodybuilder in a light session in his gym. Now, the bodybuilder in question was definitely a bit more athletic than your average dude on the street, but even still, you can really get a sense of just how many levels exist between the two. Thompson can make most fighters in the world look like rookies, and even going about 20%, he made his adversary look truly helpless. His prospects of reaching welterweight title contention again are pretty bleak at this point in time, but make no mistake, Stephen Thompson will be forever remembered as one of the most electric strikers in UFC history. Andrei Arlovski. Bully Beatdown is like a snapshot into a different world. As a majorly popular TV show from the early 2010s, its premise was simple. Get a regular guy who may or may not have picked on some other kids and put them in a cage with a professional MMA fighter. Now, while the legitimacy of the show was called into question, the fights themselves were just about as real as it gets, and put the bullies brought in to get their own beating. Few had it tougher than the unlucky contestant who drew Andrei Arlovski out for a fight. Believe us, he did not have an easy time with the pit bull. Arlovski looked like he actually had to prove a point, and proceeded to dominate and TKO his opponent in just under 40 seconds. There was a look in his eyes that can only be described as terrifying, and whether the victim in question was a real bully or just someone who thought they could hang with an MMA fighter, the end result was the same. Kevin Holland. And finally, we're going to bring Kevin Holland back into the mix, except this time for very different reasons. Holland finds himself in the news just as much for his big mouth as he does for his fighting skills. But on this occasion, the entire MMA community were firmly behind it. After getting fed up with an online troll who told him he would easily take him down and submit him, Holland decided to take matters into his own hands, paying for the troll in question to travel and stay in a hotel just so he could prove him wrong in front of all of his followers. And that will just about do it for this video. Again, if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.